humid Atlanta air hung heavy on that August evening in 2016, making the cramped apartment feel even smaller than usual. Sarah Williams sat on her narrow bed, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands for what felt like the 100th time that day. The pink lines hadn't changed. They were still there, bold and undeniable, marking the end of life as she knew it. At 17, Sarah had always been the quiet one, the daughter who followed rules and never caused trouble. Her mother, Gloria Williams, had raised her with strict Christian values after Sarah's father died when she was 8. When Gloria remarried 2 years later to Robert Henderson, a stern man who worked at the local factory, their small family dynamic shifted completely. Robert brought his own set of rigid expectations, and Gloria, desperate to make her second marriage work, often sided with her new husband over her own daughter. Sarah could hear them talking in the kitchen, their voices carrying through the thin walls of their second-floor apartment in the faded brick building on Peachtree Street. The building had seen better days, paint peeling from the hallways, creaky floors that announced every footstep, and windows that stuck in the summer heat. But it was home, the only home Sarah had known since childhood. She's been acting strange. Lately, Gloria's voice drifted through the door. Throwing up in the mornings, barely eating dinner. And did you see how loose that dress was on her yesterday? Sarah's heart pounded as she realized they were talking about her. She pressed her ear to the door, the pregnancy test still clutched in her palm. I told you that boy was trouble, Robert's gruff voice responded. Marcus Johnson from down the street. I seen them together too many times. Now look what's happened. We don't know anything yet, Robert. Don't go making accusations. Gloria, wake up. The girl's 17 and sneaking around with boys. What did you think was gonna happen? Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Marcus, how he'd promised her everything would be okay, how he'd said he loved her, how he'd disappeared the moment she told him she might be pregnant 3 weeks ago. She hadn't seen him since, and his friend said his family had moved to another part of town. The betrayal still stung, but now it seemed insignificant compared to what she was about to face. The apartment door slammed shut, Robert leaving for his evening shift at the factory. This was her chance. Sarah took a deep breath, slipped the pregnancy test into her pocket, and walked to the kitchen where her mother was washing dishes with mechanical precision. Mama, we need to talk. Gloria didn't turn around, but her shoulders tensed. About what, baby? About this. Sarah pulled out the test and placed it on the counter next to the sink. The dish Gloria was washing slipped from her hands, clattering into the soapy water. She turned slowly, her dark eyes finding the test, then moving to Sarah's face. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Oh, Sarah. Gloria's voice was barely a whisper. Oh, my baby girl. What have you done? Mama, I know this isn't what you wanted, but what I wanted. Gloria's voice rose sharply. Sarah, you're 17 years old. You're supposed to be thinking about your senior year, about college, about your future, not about this. Sarah had expected disappointment, even anger, but the look of pure devastation on her mother's face cut deeper than any shouting could have. Gloria sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her head in her hands. What's Robert gonna say? What's Pastor Williams gonna think? Sarah, how could you be so careless? I didn't plan this, Mama. It just happened. But Marcus said, Marcus? Gloria's head snapped up. Where is Marcus now, Sarah? When you needed him most, where is that boy? Sarah's throat tightened. He left. His family moved and he won't return my calls. Of course he did. Gloria's laugh was bitter. They always do, baby girl. They always do. The front door opened again, and Robert's heavy footsteps announced his return. He'd forgotten his lunch pail, something that happened at least twice a week. His voice boomed from the living room. Gloria. Where'd you put my... He stopped mid-sentence as he entered the kitchen and saw both women's tear-stained faces and the pregnancy test on the counter. Robert Henderson was a large man, not just in physical stature, but in presence. He filled every room he entered with his opinions and expectations. At 45, he'd worked factory jobs his entire adult life and believed in traditional values, hard work, and maintaining respectability in the community. Sarah had never been comfortable around him, but she'd learned to navigate his moods and requirements over the past 7 years. Now, as his eyes moved from the test to Sarah's face, she saw something she'd never seen before. Pure disgust. Well. His voice was dangerously quiet. Looks like I was right about that Johnson boy. Robert, please, Gloria started, but he held up a hand to silence her. 17 years old and already throwing your life away, just like your mother did the first time around. Sarah flinched. Robert rarely mentioned her father directly, but the implication was clear. Gloria had gotten pregnant young with Sarah, though she'd been married at the time. That's not fair, Sarah said, finding her voice. My parents were married when they had me. Were they? Robert's smile was cruel. You sure about that little girl? Gloria stood abruptly. Robert, that's enough. Don't take this out on her by bringing up the past. But the damage was done. Sarah stared at her mother, seeing confirmation in her eyes. What is he talking about, Mama? Sarah, baby, it doesn't matter now. What matters is figuring out what we're going to do about this situation. The situation? Sarah's voice grew stronger. You mean your grandbaby? Robert laughed harshly. Grandbaby? Girl, you think we're going to celebrate this mistake? You think we're going to help you raise some boy's bastard child while you're still a child yourself? Robert! Gloria's voice was sharp, but Sarah could see the conflict in her mother's face. Part of her wanted to defend her daughter, but another part, the part that had spent 7 years trying to please her second husband, was wavering. I'm keeping the baby, Sarah said firmly, surprised by her own certainty. I know this isn't ideal, but I'm not giving up my child. Like hell you are. Robert moved closer, his bulk intimidating in the small kitchen. Not under my roof. Not with my name attached to this family's reputation. Your name? Sarah's anger finally flared. My name is Williams, not Henderson. This is my family too. Not anymore, it ain't. Robert turned to Gloria. She wants to keep it? Fine. But she ain't doing it here. I won't have the whole neighborhood talking about how we raised a whore under our roof. Don't call her that! Gloria's voice cracked like a whip, and for a moment, Sarah thought her mother would choose her daughter over her husband. But Robert stepped closer to Gloria, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. You choose, Gloria, her or me, because I'm not staying in a house where we're going to be raising somebody else's bastard while that girl ruins any chance at a decent life she might have had. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched her mother's face, seeing the war playing out behind her eyes. 7 years of marriage to Robert, 7 years of stability after the chaos of being a young widow, 7 years of having a man's income to help support them. Against that stood 17 years of being Sarah's mother, 17 years of love and protection and sacrifice. Mama? Sarah's voice was small, vulnerable in a way it hadn't been since she was a little girl. Gloria's eyes filled with fresh tears. Sarah, baby, maybe Robert's right. Maybe there are other options. Maybe we could look into other arrangements. You mean adoption? Or... Gloria couldn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. No. Sarah's voice was firm. I'm not doing that, Mama. I can't. Then you got a choice to make, girl. Robert's voice had the finality of a judge's gavel. You can give up this foolishness, get rid of the problem, and stay here to finish school and make something of yourself. Or you can leave. Tonight. Robert, please. Gloria tried one more time. She's still my daughter. She's still just a child herself. A child who made an adult decision. Now she can live with adult consequences. Sarah looked between them, seeing her mother's internal struggle, seeing Robert's immovable stance. She thought about her options, staying and giving up her baby, or leaving and keeping her child but losing everything else she'd ever known. The choice, when it came, felt like stepping off a cliff. I'll pack my things. Sarah, no. Gloria reached for her daughter's hand. Please don't do this. Think about your future, your education, your whole life ahead of you. I am thinking about it, Mama. And I'm thinking about my baby's future too. Sarah pulled her hand away gently. can't give up my child, I won't. Robert nodded curtly. Then you better be gone before I get back from work tomorrow morning. And don't expect any help from us. You made your bed, now you lie in it. As Robert left for his shift again, Sarah went to her room and began packing. Her hands shook as she folded clothes into her old duffel bag, the same one she'd used for church camp 3 summers ago when life was simpler. She had $200 saved from her part-time job at the grocery store, a few changes of clothes, and her mother's old Bible that Gloria had given her for confirmation. Gloria appeared in the doorway, watching silently as Sarah packed. I never wanted this for you, baby girl. I wanted you to have chances I never had. You still could give me that chance, Mama. You could choose me. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the words they couldn't say. Finally, Gloria spoke, her voice barely audible. I can't lose another husband, Sarah. I can't go through that again. Sarah nodded, understanding even as her heart broke. I know, Mama. Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Gloria reached into her purse and pulled out a small roll of bills. Take this. It's not much, but it's all I can spare. Sarah looked at the money, maybe another $100, and thought about refusing it. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Thank you. As the August night deepened, Sarah finished packing and shouldered her bag. At the front door, Gloria hugged her daughter fiercely, both of them crying. I love you, Sarah. Don't ever forget that. I love you too, Mama. Sarah walked down the stairs of the building that had been her home for 9 years, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Outside, the Atlanta heat was still oppressive even at midnight, and the streetlights cast long shadows between the buildings. She turned back once to look up at the second-floor window where a light still glowed in her mother's kitchen. Then she placed her hand protectively over her still flat stomach and whispered to the child growing inside her. It's just you and me now, baby. But I promise you something. Someday we're gonna come back here, and we're gonna be just fine. Better than fine. We're gonna show them all what we're made of. With that promise hanging in the humid Atlanta air, Sarah Williams walked away from everything she'd ever known, carrying nothing but hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that love would be enough to build a new life from nothing. 2 years had passed since that humid August night, but Sarah Williams could still remember every detail of walking away from her childhood home. Now, in the sweltering summer of 2018, she stood in the cramped kitchen of her 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Atlanta, watching her 18-month-old daughter Maya attempt to feed herself scrambled eggs. Most of the eggs ended up on the floor or smeared across Maya's cherubic face. But her determined little fingers kept trying, and Sarah couldn't help but smile despite her exhaustion. You're gonna get it eventually, baby girl, Sarah whispered, gently wiping Maya's face with a damp cloth. Just like Mama's gonna figure everything out too. The apartment was a far cry from the building where Sarah had grown up. This place was in a complex that had seen better days, probably sometime in the 1980s. The carpet was worn thin in spots, the kitchen faucet dripped constantly no matter how many times the superintendent promised to fix it, and the air conditioning unit wheezed and rattled like it was fighting for its last breath. But it was theirs, and Sarah had worked 3 jobs to make sure they could afford even this modest space. Maya babbled happily in her high chair, a string of sounds that almost resembled words. At 18 months, she was starting to walk steadily, and had recently discovered the word no, which she used liberally and with great enthusiasm. Sarah often caught glimpses of her own stubbornness in her daughter's determined expression, especially when Maya decided she didn't want to wear shoes or eat vegetables. Mama has to go to work now, sweetheart, Sarah said, lifting Maya from the high chair and settling her on her hip. We're going to see Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen lived in the apartment directly below Sarah's, and had become something of a guardian angel over the past year. Elena Chen was a 62-year-old woman whose own children had grown up and moved to different states. Her husband had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving her alone in an apartment filled with memories and an aching need to nurture someone. When Sarah had moved into the building, heavily pregnant and clearly struggling, Mrs. Chen had immediately taken her under her wing. What started as occasional help, Mrs. Chen bringing up homemade soup when Sarah was too tired to cook or watching, Maya, for a few minutes while Sarah ran to the store, had evolved into an informal childcare arrangement. Mrs. Chen watched Maya during the day while Sarah worked at the diner, and in return, Sarah helped with Mrs. Chen's grocery shopping and other errands that had become difficult for the older woman. Sarah knocked softly on Mrs. Chen's door, and it opened almost immediately. Mrs. Chen had a way of knowing when they were coming down, as if she had radar for the sound of Sarah's footsteps on the stairs above. "Good morning, my dear," Mrs. Chen said in her gentle voice, still touched with the faint accent of her childhood in Taiwan. She reached for Maya immediately, and the toddler went to her happily, having learned that Mrs. Chen's apartment always smelled like delicious food and contained interesting objects to explore. "Morning, Mrs. Chen. I left her diaper bag by the door upstairs, and there's a bottle in there if she gets fussy. I should be back by 3. Don't worry about us. We'll be just fine, won't we, little one?" Mrs. Chen bounced Maya gently, earning a giggle in response. "Sarah, you look tired. Are you eating enough?" It was a question Mrs. Chen asked almost daily, usually followed by pressing containers of leftover food into Sarah's hands. Sarah suspected that Mrs. Chen cooked extra on purpose, claiming she always made too much for one person. "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen." "Really? Just the usual craziness at the diner?" Sarah worked at Mel's Diner, a 24-hour establishment that served truckers, night shift workers, and anyone else who needed a meal at odd hours. She'd started there when Maya was 3 months old, working the morning shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The pay wasn't great, but the tips were decent, and Mel, the gruff owner, had been understanding about Sarah's situation as a single mother. The work was physically demanding. Long hours on her feet, carrying heavy trays, dealing with difficult customers who sometimes made inappropriate comments or advances. But Sarah had developed a thick skin and a quick wit that served her well. She'd learned to deflect unwanted attention with humor, to remember complex orders without writing them down, and to move efficiently through the cramped restaurant even during the busiest rushes. "You know," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully, watching Maya play with the colorful blocks she kept in a basket by the couch, "I've been thinking about something. You're so smart, Sarah. You handle numbers in your head faster than most people can with a calculator. You organize everything so well. Have you ever thought about doing something different?" "Different how?" Sarah paused in gathering Maya's things, curious about where this conversation was heading. "My late husband, he used to do books for small businesses around here. Nothing fancy, just helping people keep track of their money, their expenses, their taxes. Simple stuff, but so important. And these business owners, they're always looking for someone honest and reliable." Sarah had heard Mr. Chen mention before, always with great fondness. He'd been an accountant in Taiwan before immigrating to the United States, but his credentials hadn't transferred. So he'd made a living doing bookkeeping for local restaurants, small shops, and service businesses. "I don't know anything about bookkeeping, Mrs. Chen." "You could learn. You're smart enough. And I still have all of Harold's books, his guides, his notes. He was very thorough." Mrs. Chen's eyes grew distant for a moment, then refocused on Sarah. With renewed intensity, "You can't work at that diner forever, dear. Not if you want to build something better for Maya." The comment hit Sarah harder than Mrs. Chen probably intended. The truth was, Sarah thought about Maya's future constantly. She wanted her daughter to have opportunities, to go to college, to never have to worry about where her next meal was coming from or whether they could afford rent each month. But it was hard to see a path from where they were now to where Sarah dreamed they could be. "I wouldn't even know where to start," Sarah admitted. "Start with learning. I'll show you Harold's materials. You can study them in the evenings after Maya goes to bed. And when you're ready, I'll introduce you to some of the business owners Harold used to help. Many of them are still struggling to keep their books straight." Sarah felt a flutter of possibility in her chest, but also fear. "What if I'm not good at it? What if I mess up someone's business?" Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. "Harold used to say that the biggest part of bookkeeping isn't being perfect, it's being honest and careful. You're both of those things, Sarah, and you're motivated to succeed in a way that many people aren't." That evening, after Maya had been fed, bathed, and finally coaxed to sleep in her crib, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee and one of Mr. Chen's old accounting textbooks. The pages were yellowed and filled with his careful handwritten notes in the margins. The material was dense and sometimes confusing, but Sarah found herself genuinely interested in the logic of it all. The way numbers told the story of a business, how careful record-keeping could mean the difference between success and failure. She studied for 2 hours that first night until her eyes burned and her head ached. But she also felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: intellectual stimulation. At the diner, her mind wasn't challenged beyond remembering orders and calculating tips. This was different. This required her to think, to analyze, to solve problems. Over the following weeks, Sarah established a routine. She would come home from the diner, spend time with Maya, put her daughter to bed, and then study until midnight or later. Mrs. Chen proved to be an invaluable resource, not just for the books and materials, but for practical advice about how small businesses operated. Harold always said you have to understand the business before you can understand the books. Mrs. Chen explained one evening as Sarah struggled with a particularly complex example about inventory management. If you don't know how a restaurant orders food, stores it, uses it, and tracks waste, then the numbers don't mean anything. Sarah began paying attention to the operations at Mel's diner with new eyes. She watched how Mel managed inventory, how he tracked employee hours, how he calculated food costs. She started asking questions, and Mel, flattered by her interest, began explaining the business side of running a restaurant. "You know, Sarah," Mel said one afternoon during a slow period, "you got a good head for this stuff. Most of my waitresses, they just want to get through their shift and go home. But you actually care about how things work. I'm just curious, I guess." "Curious is good. Curious is how you get ahead in life." Mel wiped down the counter thoughtfully. "You ever think about doing something besides waiting tables?" Sarah almost laughed. If only he knew how much she thought about exactly that. "Sometimes, but I've got Maya to think about and I need steady income right now." "I get it. Kids change everything. But don't let being a mom stop you from having dreams, you know? Good mothers show their kids that you can work hard for what you want." After 3 months of intensive studying, Mrs. Chen arranged for Sarah to meet with Tony Rodriguez, who owned a small auto repair shop a few miles away. Tony had been one of Mr. Chen's clients, and his books had been a mess since Harold's death. Sarah arrived at the shop, nervous but prepared, wearing her best dress and carrying a folder with samples of practice bookkeeping work she'd done. The shop was busy with 3 cars in various stages of repair and the sounds of pneumatic tools and Spanish music filling the air. Tony was a man in his 40s with grease-stained hands and a warm smile. He led Sarah to a cramped office behind the main work area, where boxes of receipts, invoices, and bank statements created a chaotic landscape across his desk. "Mrs. Chen says you might be able to help me make sense of this mess," Tony said, gesturing at the paperwork. "I'm good with cars, but numbers are not my friend." Sarah spent an hour going through Tony's records, asking questions about his business operations and taking notes. The work was more complex than her textbook examples, but the principles were the same. More importantly, she could see exactly how to organize the chaos into a system that would give Tony clear information about his business's financial health. "I think I can help," Sarah said finally. "But I should be honest with you, I'm still learning this stuff. I've been studying for a few months, but I've never actually done bookkeeping for a real business before." Tony laughed. "You know more than I do, and you actually understand what you're looking at. Harold always said the most important thing was finding someone you could trust. Mrs. Chen trusts you, and that's good enough for me." They agreed on a trial arrangement. Sarah would come in on weekends to work on Tony's books, charging a fraction of what a professional bookkeeper would cost. In return, Tony would be patient while she learned the ropes and would give her an honest reference if things worked out. Sarah's first real bookkeeping job was harder than she'd anticipated. Tony's record-keeping had been haphazard at best, and some of the older records were incomplete or confusing. She spent entire weekends at the shop, sometimes bringing Maya along when Mrs. Chen wasn't available to babysit. Maya would play with toy cars on the office floor while Sarah worked through piles of paperwork. There were moments of frustration when Sarah questioned whether she was in over her head. One Saturday, she spent 4 hours trying to reconcile a bank statement that was off by $300, only to discover that Tony had forgotten to mention a cash payment from a customer that he'd deposited without recording. But there were also moments of triumph. The first time Sarah presented Tony with a clean profit and loss statement that clearly showed which services were most profitable and which months were strongest for his business, his face lit up with understanding. "This is amazing," Tony said, studying the report Sarah had prepared. "I never knew I was making so much more money on transmission work than on oil changes. And look at this. I can see exactly where my busy seasons are." "Knowledge is power," Sarah said, echoing something she'd read in one of Mr. Chen's books. "When you understand your business financially, you can make better decisions about how to grow it." Word of Sarah's work began to spread through Tony's network of business contacts. Maria Santos, who owned a small grocery store, asked Sarah to help her understand why her profits seemed lower than they should be. Sarah discovered that Maria was being overcharged by one of her suppliers and helped her renegotiate better terms, saving the store nearly $200 a month. Carlos Mendez needed help preparing financial statements for a loan application to expand his landscaping business. Sarah worked with him to organize 2 years of financial records and create projections that helped him secure the funding he needed. Each client brought new challenges and learning opportunities. Sarah found herself studying tax law, learning about different business structures, and researching industry-specific accounting practices. Her kitchen table became a makeshift office, covered with client files, reference books, and her ever-present cup of coffee. The income from her bookkeeping clients wasn't enough to replace her wages from the diner yet, but it was growing steadily. More importantly, Sarah was building a reputation in the small business community as someone who was reliable, honest, and surprisingly knowledgeable for someone so young. Mrs. Chen watched Sarah's transformation with pride and satisfaction. "Harold would be so pleased," she told Sarah one evening as they watched Maya play with blocks on Mrs. Chen's living room floor. "He always said that helping small businesses succeed was like planting seeds in the community." "I never thought I'd enjoy working with numbers so much," Sarah admitted. "But there's something satisfying about taking a mess and making it make sense, you know? And when I can help someone like Tony or Maria understand their business better, it feels like I'm actually making a difference." "You are making a difference, and you're building something that will give Maya a better future." Sarah looked at her daughter, who was concentrating intensely on stacking blocks as high as possible before they toppled over. Maya's determination reminded Sarah of her own journey, building something from nothing, falling down, and getting back up to try again. The biggest test of Sarah's growing business came when Tony's shop was audited by the IRS. Sarah had been doing his books for 8 months, and the audit covered records going back 3 years, including the chaotic period before Sarah had organized everything. Sarah spent weeks preparing for meetings with the IRS agent, gathering documentation and explaining the improvements that had been made to Tony's record keeping. She was nervous but thorough, and when the audit was completed with no additional taxes owed, Tony was ecstatic. "Sarah, you saved my business," Tony said, giving her an impulsive hug. That agent said our current records were some of the cleanest he'd seen from a shop this size. He actually complimented the organization. The successful audit became a powerful testimonial for Sarah's services. Tony recommended her to everyone he knew, and soon Sarah had more potential clients than she could handle while still working at the diner. The turning point came on a particularly busy day at Mel's. Sarah was juggling 6 tables, dealing with a difficult customer who was complaining about everything from the temperature of his coffee to the speed of service, when her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Maya has fever. Can you come?" "Home?" Sarah's heart clenched with the familiar panic that every working mother knows. She explained the situation to Mel, who grudgingly let her leave early, but she could see his irritation. This wasn't the first time Sarah had needed to leave work for Maya-related emergencies, and she knew Mel's patience was wearing thin. At home, she found Maya listless and warm, her usual bright energy dimmed by illness. Mrs. Chen had given her children's fever reducer, but Maya was clearly miserable, wanting only to cling to her mother. Sarah spent the next 2 days home with Maya, missing work and losing wages she couldn't afford to lose. But as she held her daughter and felt Maya's fever gradually break, Sarah realized something important. She was tired of having to choose between being a good mother and being a reliable employee. That weekend, Sarah sat down with a calculator and her client list. Her bookkeeping income had grown to almost $600 a month, not enough to replace her diner wages, but close enough that she could see a path forward. She made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She would give Mel her 2 weeks' notice and build her bookkeeping business into something that could fully support her and Maya. "Are you sure about this?" Mrs. Chen asked when Sarah shared her plan. "It's a big risk, giving up steady income." "It's a bigger risk to stay stuck," Sarah replied, bouncing Maya on her knee. "I want to build something that's mine, something that gives me control over my time and my future. I want Maya to see that you can create opportunities for yourself, not just wait for someone else to give them to you." As Sarah typed her resignation letter that night, Maya sleeping peacefully in her crib nearby, she thought about how much had changed since that night 2 years ago when she'd walked away from her childhood home. She'd hit rock bottom, sleeping on couches, working multiple jobs, struggling to make ends meet. But somehow, in the midst of all that struggle, she'd found something valuable, the knowledge that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. The letter was simple and professional, thanking Mel for the opportunity and giving proper notice. But as Sarah printed it out, she felt like she was printing out a declaration of independence from other people's schedules, from other people's expectations, from the limitations that had once seemed insurmountable. Tomorrow, she would begin, building something entirely her own. And for the first time since that night when she'd promised her unborn daughter that they would be better than fine, Sarah truly believed that promise was within reach. By the fall of 2022, Sarah Williams had transformed her life in ways that would have seemed impossible 4 years earlier. At 23, she sat in her new office, a converted bedroom in a much nicer apartment in Virginia Highland, reviewing financial statements for her growing list of clients. Maya, now 5 and starting kindergarten, was at the kitchen table doing homework under the watchful eye of Mrs. Chen, who had moved with them when Sarah could finally afford a 2-bedroom place in a better neighborhood. The bookkeeping business had grown beyond Sarah's wildest expectations. What started with Tony Rodriguez's auto repair shop had expanded to include 17 small businesses across Atlanta. Sarah's reputation for reliability, accuracy, and genuine care for her clients' success had spread through word of mouth, creating a steady stream of referrals. "Mama, can you help me with this math problem?" Maya called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the slight lisp that made Sarah's heart melt every time. "Just a minute, baby girl. Let me finish this report for Mr. Patel." Maya was thriving in ways that filled Sarah with quiet pride. She was reading above grade level, showed a natural aptitude for numbers that reminded Sarah of herself, and had inherited her mother's determination, along with a curiosity about everything around her. The stability of the past 2 years had given Maya the security to be a normal, happy child, something Sarah had worried might not be possible during those early struggling months. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Kumar, a real estate agent who had become both a client and a friend. "Coffee tomorrow? I have an idea I want to run by you." Jessica was different from Sarah's other clients. While most of them were immigrant business owners running restaurants, shops, or service businesses, Jessica was a second-generation Indian American who had gone to college and was building a successful career in real estate. She was only a few years older than Sarah, but she moved in circles that Sarah was just beginning to understand. Professional networks, investment opportunities, and financial strategies that went beyond simple bookkeeping. The next morning, Sarah met Jessica at a trendy coffee shop in Buckhead. Jessica was already waiting, impeccably dressed in a way that Sarah admired but couldn't quite afford to emulate. Sarah had learned to present herself professionally, clean, neat, competent, but Jessica had the polish that came from growing up with money and connections. "You look good," Jessica said as Sarah joined her at a corner table. "Success suits you." It was true. Sarah carried herself differently now than she had 2 years ago. The constant worry about money hadn't disappeared, but it had lessened enough that she could focus on building rather than just surviving. She'd learned to speak confidently about business matters, to negotiate fair rates for her services, and to present herself as a professional rather than just a young mother trying to get by. Thanks. You said you had an idea? Jessica leaned forward, her dark eyes bright with excitement. I've been watching what you've done with your business, and I'm impressed. You've identified a need in the market, built a reputation, and created steady income from services. But Sarah, you're still trading. Time for money. There's only so much you can scale. Sarah nodded. It was something she'd been thinking about lately. Even working 60 hours a week, there was a ceiling to how much she could earn from bookkeeping alone. So what are you suggesting? Real estate. Jessica pulled out her tablet and opened a presentation she'd clearly prepared. Look, you understand numbers better than most people. You see how businesses operate, what makes them profitable, what their cash flow looks like. Those skills translate directly to property investment. The screen showed photos of small apartment buildings, duplexes, and single-family homes in various Atlanta neighborhoods. Jessica swiped through images of renovated properties before and after, shots that showed dramatic improvements. I've been working with a group of investors who buy undervalued properties, fix them up, and either rent them out or sell them for profit. We're always looking for partners who can bring capital, but more importantly, we need people who can analyze deals and manage the financial side. Sarah studied the numbers Jessica showed her: purchase prices, renovation costs, rental income projections, and final sale prices. The math was compelling, but also intimidating. Jessica, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I don't have the kind of money it takes to buy investment properties. My savings account has maybe $15,000, and most of that is Maya's college fund. That's where it gets interesting. Jessica's smile was conspiratorial. There are ways to get into real estate with less money down than you think. Government programs for first-time investors, partnerships where you bring expertise instead of just cash, creative financing structures. And Sarah, you have something that's actually more valuable than money. You have a network of small business owners who trust you. Over the next hour, Jessica outlined a world that Sarah had never considered. She talked about FHA loans that required as little as 3% down, about house hacking strategies where you live in one unit of a duplex while renting out the other, about connecting with contractors and property managers and real estate wholesalers. The key is to start small, Jessica explained. Buy a duplex, live in one side, rent out the other. Let the rental income help pay your mortgage. After a year, you can move out and rent both sides, then use the equity and cash flow to buy another property. Sarah felt the familiar flutter of possibility mixed with fear that had accompanied every major decision in her life. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't find tenants, or the renovations cost more than expected, or what if something goes right? Jessica interrupted gently. Sarah, you've already proven you can succeed at things you never thought possible. 4 years ago, did you think you'd be running your own business and supporting Maya this well? That evening, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the conversation while Maya slept peacefully in the next room. The idea of real estate investment felt both exciting and terrifying. It represented a level of financial sophistication that seemed far beyond the girl who had walked out of her mother's apartment with nothing but a suitcase and $200 dollars. But as Sarah considered her current situation, she realized that staying where she was might actually be the riskier choice. Her bookkeeping business was successful, but it was also dependent on her personal involvement in every aspect. If she got sick, or if Maya needed her for an extended period, the income would stop immediately. And while she was making a decent living, she wasn't building the kind of wealth that would give Maya real opportunities. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into learning about real estate with the same intensity she'd once applied to bookkeeping. She read books, watched YouTube videos, attended investment meetups, and picked Jessica's brain constantly. Mrs. Chen, ever supportive, watched Maya during evening events and offered encouragement even when she didn't fully understand what Sarah was planning. Harold always said that smart people find ways to make their money work for them instead of just working for money. Mrs. Chen observed one evening as Sarah studied market comparisons on her laptop. Sarah's first real estate deal came 3 months later. It was a small duplex in East Atlanta, a neighborhood that was showing signs of gentrification but still had reasonable property prices. The building needed work, new flooring, updated electrical, a complete renovation of both kitchens, but the bones were solid and the location was promising. The numbers worked, barely. With an FHA loan requiring only 3.5% down, Sarah could afford the purchase price of $180,000. Her business had generated enough income over the past year to qualify for the mortgage, and she had enough savings to cover the down payment and closing costs. The projected rental income from both units would cover the mortgage payment, insurance, and taxes, with a small positive cash flow if everything went according to plan. What made Sarah's stomach churn with anxiety was the renovation budget. Based on estimates from contractors Jessica had recommended, the improvements would cost another $25,000. Money Sarah would have to finance through a combination of a personal loan and carefully managed cash flow from her business. "You sure about this, baby?" Mrs. Chen asked the night before Sarah was scheduled to sign the purchase agreement. "It's a lot of risk." Sarah looked around their current apartment, comfortable but rented, representing no building of equity or long-term security. "I'm sure about what happens if I don't take risks, Mrs. Chen. Maya and I stay exactly where we are, and that's not good enough anymore." The closing process was more stressful than Sarah had anticipated. There were inspections that revealed additional problems, paperwork that seemed endless, and moments when Sarah wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But Jessica walked her through each step, and Tony Rodriguez, who had become something of a father figure, offered to help with some of the renovation work at cost. "You helped save my business," Tony said when Sarah tried to pay his full rate for the electrical work. "Now let me help you build yours." The renovation took 4 months and cost $32,000, $7,000 more than budgeted. Sarah had to take on additional bookkeeping clients and work longer hours to cover the overruns. But gradually, the duplex transformed from a rundown property into an attractive rental. The first tenant was a young teacher named Amanda who fell in love with the renovated unit and the neighborhood's walkability. The second unit took longer to rent, and Sarah spent anxious weeks calculating whether she could cover the full mortgage payment alone. But eventually, she found Marcus, a graduate student at Georgia Tech who needed a quiet place to study and was willing to sign a longer lease in exchange for slightly reduced rent. With both units rented, Sarah's first property generated a positive cash flow of $400 per month. Not a fortune, but enough to prove the concept worked. More importantly, she was building equity in an appreciating asset while her tenants paid down the mortgage. The success of the first property opened doors Sarah hadn't expected. Other real estate investors began to notice her analytical skills and attention to detail. She was invited to join an investment group that pooled resources to buy larger properties, and she started providing financial analysis services to other investors, in addition to her traditional bookkeeping clients. Sarah's second property purchase came 8 months later, a single-family house in a transitioning neighborhood that she bought as a partnership with Jessica and 2 other investors. Sarah contributed the financial analysis and project management in exchange for a 20% ownership stake, while the other partners provided most of the capital. This deal was more complex, involving a complete renovation that took 6 months and cost $60,000. But when they sold the property, Sarah's share of the profit was $18,000, more money than she'd ever had at one time in her life. "This is how you build wealth," Jessica explained as they celebrated the successful sale. "Not just by working harder, but by making your money and your expertise work for you." By 2023, Sarah had become a different person than the frightened teenager who had left her mother's apartment 6 years earlier. She owned 2 rental properties, had a growing real estate investment business, and was recognized in Atlanta's small business community as someone who understood both the financial and operational sides of property investment. But success had come with unexpected challenges. The more successful Sarah became, the more she realized how much she still didn't know. dealing with difficult tenants, managing contractors, understanding tax implications of property sales, navigating city permitting processes. Each step forward revealed new complexities that required learning and adaptation. There was also the emotional cost. Sarah worked constantly, driven by a combination of ambition and the fear that everything she'd built could disappear as quickly as it had come. Maya was thriving, but Sarah sometimes worried that her daughter was spending too much time with Mrs. Chen and not enough with her mother. "Mama, why do you work so much?" Maya asked one evening as Sarah tucked her into bed after getting home late from a property showing. The question hit Sarah harder than Maya probably intended. "I work hard so that we can have a good life, baby girl. So that you can have choices when you grow up. But don't you want to just play sometimes?" Sarah looked at her daughter's serious 5-year-old face and felt a pang of guilt. In her drive to build financial security, was she missing out on the simple joys of being Maya's mother? "You know what? Tomorrow is Saturday and we're going to spend the whole day together. Just you and me. What would you like to do?" Maya's face lit up. "Can we go to the park and maybe get ice cream? And can you read me 3 stories instead of just 1? "Absolutely." As Sarah turned off Maya's light and watched her daughter drift off to sleep, she reflected on how far they'd come. The scared teenager who had walked out with nothing had built a business, acquired property, and created the kind of life she'd only dreamed about 6 years ago. But the most important part of that life was sleeping in the bed in front of her. Everything Sarah had accomplished meant nothing if she wasn't also succeeding as Maya's mother. The next morning, Sarah did something she hadn't done in months. She turned off her phone and spent the entire day focused on nothing but Maya. They went to the park, got ice cream, visited the zoo, and ended the day building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions in their living room. "This was the best day ever, Mama," Maya said as they sat in their cushioned fort, sharing a bowl of popcorn and watching a movie. "It really was, baby girl." That night, as Sarah reviewed her schedule for the following week, she made a decision. Success wasn't just about building wealth or accumulating properties. It was about creating a life where she could provide for Maya, while also being present for the moments that mattered. She blocked out Saturday mornings for Maya time, no exceptions. She hired an assistant to handle some of the routine tasks in her bookkeeping business. And she started saying no to opportunities that would require sacrificing too much time with her daughter. The business continued to grow, but at a more sustainable pace. Sarah's reputation in the real estate community led to consulting opportunities, speaking engagements at investment meetups, and partnerships with other entrepreneurs who valued her analytical skills and practical experience. One evening in late 2023, as Sarah was reviewing financial projections for a potential 12-unit apartment building purchase, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. "Hello? Sarah? This is your mother." Sarah's hands went still on her keyboard. She hadn't spoken to Gloria Williams in over 6 years, hadn't seen her since that night when she'd walked out carrying nothing but hope and determination. "Mama?" "Yes, baby girl, it's me." Gloria's voice was older, more fragile than Sarah remembered. I need to talk to you about a lot of things, but mainly I need to tell you how sorry I am." Sarah felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crack. "Mama, Please, Sarah, don't say anything yet. I know I don't deserve it, but I was wondering, could we meet somewhere? Could you give me a chance to explain and to see Maya, if that's okay with you?" Sarah looked across the room to where Maya was reading on the couch, her dark hair falling across her face in a way that reminded Sarah painfully of her own childhood. Her daughter was beautiful, intelligent, and thriving, everything Sarah had promised she would be during those dark early days. "Okay, Mama, we can meet." As they arranged to see each other the following weekend, Sarah felt the weight of years, of pain and success, struggle and triumph, all colliding at once. She had kept her promise to Maya and to herself. They had more than survived. They had flourished. But now, as she prepared to face the family that had rejected her, Sarah realized that the hardest part of her journey might still be ahead of her. The morning of November 15th, 2024, Sarah Williams stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her Buckhead townhouse, trying to calm the nervous energy that had kept her awake most of the night. Today was the day she would see her mother for the first time in 8 years, and despite all the success she'd achieved, despite the confidence she'd built through years of hard work and smart decisions, she felt like that scared 17-year-old girl again. "Mama, why are you shaking?" Maya asked from the doorway, her 6-year-old eyes wide with concern. Sarah knelt down to Maya's level, smoothing her daughter's hair. At 6, Maya was tall for her age, with Sarah's determined chin and expressive brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She was reading chapter books, excelling in 1st grade, and had recently announced that she wanted to be either a business lady like Mama or a veterinarian when she grew up. "I'm nervous, baby girl. Remember how I told you we were going to meet someone very special today? My grandmother?" "Yes, your grandmother, Gloria, my mother." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. Why haven't I met her before? It was a question Sarah had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. How do you explain family estrangement to a 6-year-old? How do you convey the complexity of love and hurt and forgiveness without damaging a child's trust in the world? "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and hurt each other's feelings really badly," Sarah said carefully. "When I was younger, your grandmother and I had a big disagreement and we stopped talking to each other, but now she wants to apologize and meet you. Are you going to forgive her?" The question cut straight to the heart of Sarah's anxiety. She'd built her entire adult life around the belief that she didn't need her family, that she and Maya were better off on their own. But Gloria's phone call 3 weeks ago had shaken that certainty. "I don't know yet, Maya, but I think it's important to listen to what she has to say." Mrs. Chen appeared in the hallway, now 70, and moving more slowly than she once had, but still an essential part of their daily life. Over the years, she had become Maya's surrogate grandmother, the stable family presence that Sarah had lost when she left home. "Are you sure you want to do this, dear?" Mrs. Chen asked, her voice gentle but concerned. "You've built such a good life. Sometimes it's better to leave the past in the past." Sarah had been asking herself the same question since Gloria's call. The conversation had been brief and emotional, with Gloria explaining that she was sick, that Robert had left her 2 years earlier, and that she'd been thinking about Sarah and her grandchild every day for the past 8 years. "I have to try, Mrs. Chen. If not for me, then for Maya. She deserves to know her family, even if they're complicated." They had arranged to meet at Piedmont Park, neutral territory that held no painful memories for either of them. Sarah chose a Saturday morning when the park would be busy with families, thinking that the public setting might help keep emotions in check. The drive from Buckhead to the park took 20 minutes through Atlanta traffic, but it felt like hours. Sarah had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a navy blue dress that was professional but not intimidating, successful but not showy. She wanted Gloria to see that she had thrived, but she didn't want to seem like she was rubbing her success in her mother's face. "Tell me again about the building where you used to live," Maya said from her car seat in the back. It had become one of Maya's favorite stories. How Mama had lived in an apartment building when she was little, how she'd had to leave when Maya was still in her tummy, and how they'd worked hard to build their own life together. Sarah had always told it as a story of adventure and determination, carefully editing out the pain and abandonment. It was a brick building with lots of apartments. I lived there with my mother, your grandmother, and my stepfather, Robert. "Is Robert coming today too?" "No, baby girl, just grandmother Gloria." Sarah had learned from their phone conversation that Robert had left Gloria after losing his job at the factory and spiraling into alcoholism and gambling. Gloria was now living alone in the same apartment, working part-time at a grocery store, and struggling with diabetes that she couldn't afford to manage properly. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The woman who had chosen her husband over her daughter was now alone, while the daughter she'd rejected had built a life filled with love, success, and community. As they walked through Piedmont Park toward the designated meeting spot near the playground, Sarah felt her phone buzz with a text. "I'm here. I'm the woman in the red jacket on the bench by the swings." Sarah looked across the playground and saw her. Gloria Williams looked older than her 52 years, her once dark hair now streaked with gray and her face lined with what looked like years of worry and regret. She was thinner than Sarah remembered, and there was something fragile about the way she sat on the bench, as if she was afraid she might break. Their eyes met across the playground, and Gloria stood slowly, her hand pressed to her heart. 8 years of separation collapsed into a single moment of recognition and pain. "Stay close to me, okay, Maya?" Sarah whispered, taking her daughter's hand. The walk across the playground felt endless. Other families were enjoying the crisp November morning. Children on swings, parents pushing strollers, the normal rhythm of family life that Sarah had created for herself and Maya, but had never experienced with her own mother. "Sarah?" Gloria's voice was barely a whisper as they approached. "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. You look like a successful woman." It was such an inadequate thing to say after 8 years of silence, but Sarah could see the emotion behind the words. Gloria's eyes were already filled with tears, and her hands shook as she reached toward Sarah, then stopped herself, unsure if touch was welcome. "Hello, Mama." The word felt strange on Sarah's tongue after so many years. "And this must be Maya." Gloria's voice broke as she looked at her granddaughter. "She's perfect, Sarah. She looks just like you did at that age." Maya pressed closer to Sarah's side, suddenly shy in the face of this emotional stranger. "Hi," she said in a small voice. "Maya, this is your grandmother Gloria, the one I told you about. Can I sit down?" Gloria asked, gesturing toward the bench. "I'm not as strong as I used to be." They sat together on the bench, an awkward triangle with Maya between them, and for several minutes no one spoke. Sarah studied her mother's face, seeing the years of hardship etched in new lines around her eyes, the weight loss that spoke of financial struggle, the medication bracelet on her wrist that suggested ongoing health problems. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Gloria finally said. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. I have so much to say to you, Sarah, so much to apologize for. I don't even know where to start." Sarah felt the anger she'd carried for 8 years rise up in her throat. "You could start with why you chose him over me. You could start with how you let your husband throw your pregnant daughter out into the street." Maya looked up at Sarah with wide eyes, hearing the edge in her mother's voice. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering that this conversation was happening in front of her daughter, and that whatever her own feelings were, Maya deserved to see her mother handle this with grace. "I'm sorry," Sarah said more quietly. "That came out harsher than I intended. No, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to hate me." Gloria's tears were flowing freely now. "Sarah, not a day has passed that I haven't regretted that night. Not a single day. But you regretted it for 8 years and never tried to contact me. You never tried to find out if your daughter was okay, if your grandchild was healthy, if we needed help. I tried." Gloria's voice was barely audible. "I tried so many times, but Robert, he said if I contacted you, he'd leave. And I was so scared of being alone, Sarah. I was so scared of not being able to survive without him. So you chose him. I chose fear over love. I chose the safe choice over the right choice, and I've paid for it every day since." Maya, who had been listening to this exchange with the solemn attention that children bring to adult conversations they don't fully understand, suddenly spoke up. "Grandmother Gloria, why are you crying?" Gloria looked at Maya through her tears, and Sarah saw something break open in her mother's face. All the years of missing out on her granddaughter's life hitting her at once. "I'm crying because I made a very big mistake a long time ago, and I hurt your mama very much. And I'm crying because I missed watching you grow up. Did you say sorry?" "I'm trying to, sweetheart. But sometimes when you hurt someone really badly, saying sorry isn't enough." Maya considered this with the serious logic of a 6-year-old. "Mama says when I do something really bad, I have to say sorry, and then I have to show that I'm sorry by doing better. Are you going to do better?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. This was exactly why she'd worked so hard to shield Maya from the pain of family rejection. Her daughter's innocent expectation that people could simply choose to do better was both heartbreaking and beautiful. I want to try, Maya, but I don't know if your mama will let me. Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. For 8 years, she'd imagined this moment differently. Sometimes she'd fantasized about rejecting Gloria the way she'd been rejected, about showing her mother how successful she'd become without any help. Other times she'd imagined a tearful reunion where all the hurt was magically erased. The reality was more complicated than either fantasy. Gloria was clearly sorry, clearly suffering, clearly alone. But sorry didn't erase 8 years of silence. Suffering didn't undo the choice to abandon a pregnant teenager. And loneliness wasn't Sarah's responsibility to fix. Mama, Sarah said carefully, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person who left that apartment 8 years ago. I'm not desperate for your approval or your love anymore. I built a life without you, and it's a good life. Gloria nodded, wiping her eyes. I can see that. You're strong, successful, confident. You're everything I hoped you'd become. But I also need you to understand that Maya and I are a package deal. If you want to be part of our lives, you have to earn that privilege. You can't just show up after 8 years and expect everything to go back to normal. I understand. Do you? Because here's what I won't accept. I won't accept excuses for why you abandoned me. I won't accept you putting any man before your family ever again. And I won't accept anything that might hurt Maya or make her feel unwanted the way you made me feel. The conversation was interrupted by Maya tugging on Sarah's sleeve. Mama, I need to go to the bathroom. As they walked to the park's restroom, Maya looked up at Sarah with her usual directness. Do you think Grandmother Gloria is nice? I think she's trying to be nice now, baby girl. But Mama needs to be careful and make sure she really means it before we let her be part of our family. Like when I bring home a new friend and you want to meet their parents first? Sarah smiled despite the emotional weight of the morning. Exactly, like that. When they returned to the bench, Gloria was sitting with her head in her hands, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Whatever Gloria's failures as a mother, she was clearly a woman who had suffered the consequences of her choices. Mama, tell me about Robert leaving. Gloria looked up, surprised by the question. He lost his job 2 years ago, started drinking more, gambling what little money we had. When I tried to talk to him about getting help, he said I was nagging him just like you used to. Like I used to? He said you were always too smart for your own good, always questioning his authority. He said Maya probably got that same stubborn streak from you. Gloria's smile was sad but genuine. He was right about that. Maya does seem like she has your determination. Robert blamed me for his problems even after I'd been gone for 6 years. Robert blamed everyone but himself for his problems. When he left, he told me it was my fault for raising a daughter who didn't respect men. Said if I'd been a better mother, you would have stayed and helped support the family instead of running off to get pregnant. Sarah felt anger flare again, but this time it was protective anger on behalf of the scared 17-year-old she'd once been. I didn't run off to get pregnant, Mama. I was kicked out for refusing to give up my baby. I know that now. I think I knew it then, but I was too scared to admit it. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching Maya play on the nearby swings. Sarah's daughter was fearless on the playground equipment, pumping her legs to go higher and higher, her laughter carrying across the park. She was everything Sarah had hoped she would be, confident, happy, secure in her mother's love. She's beautiful, Sarah, and smart. I can tell just from talking to her for a few minutes that you've done an amazing job raising her. Thank you. Can I ask about her father? Is he part of her life? Sarah had expected this question but still felt the familiar sting of Marcus's abandonment. No, he left when I told him I was pregnant. I haven't heard from him since. I'm sorry. That must have been so hard, doing it all alone. I wasn't completely alone. I had help, good people who became my family when my real family wasn't there. The implication was clear, and Gloria flinched. I deserve that. I'm not trying to hurt you, Mama. I'm trying to be honest about what happened and how it affected me. Maya ran back to them, slightly out of breath from playing. "Can Grandmother Gloria come see our house?" The question caught Sarah off guard. They hadn't discussed next steps, and Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to welcome Gloria into the life she'd built. Her townhouse was her sanctuary, the place where she and Maya were safe and happy. Letting Gloria in felt like opening herself up to potential hurt all over again. "I don't think today is the right day for that, Maya. But I want to show her my room and my toys and Mrs. Chen." Gloria looked at Sarah hopefully. "I don't need to come inside. I could just see where you live. See that you're really okay." Sarah considered the request. Part of her wanted Gloria to see her success, to understand exactly what she'd missed out on. Another part wanted to protect her private space from the complicated emotions that her mother's presence brought up. "Okay, you can see the house, but just from outside." The drive to Sarah's townhouse took them through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, and Sarah could see Gloria taking in the progression from modest apartments to expensive homes. When they pulled into the driveway of Sarah's 3-story townhouse in a gated community, Gloria gasped. "This is yours?" "Yes, I bought it last year. It's beautiful. It's like something from a magazine." Sarah looked at her home through her mother's eyes. The perfectly landscaped front yard, the BMW in the driveway, the large windows that spoke of space and comfort inside. It represented everything she'd worked for, everything she'd achieved without her family's help or support. What do you do for work?" Sarah had been dreading this conversation, knowing that explaining her success would require explaining just how far she'd come from the desperate teenager who'd been kicked out of home. "I run my own business, bookkeeping and financial consulting for small businesses. I also invest in real estate." "You own other properties?" "Several. I buy buildings that need work, fix them up, and rent them out." Gloria was quiet for a long moment, staring at the house. "You did all this by yourself?" "With help from friends, people who believed in me when my family didn't." The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah immediately regretted their harshness. But they were true, and pretending otherwise wouldn't help anyone. "I'm proud of you," Gloria said quietly. "I know I don't have the right to be proud since I wasn't here to help. But Sarah, what you've accomplished is incredible." "Thank you. Would it be okay if I wrote to Maya sometimes? Sent her birthday cards or Christmas presents? I know I can't just jump back into being a grandmother, but maybe we could start small?" Sarah looked at Maya, who was pressed against the car window, pointing out features of the house to her grandmother. Her daughter deserved to know her extended family, even if that family was complicated. "We can try that, but slowly. And if you disappear again, if you hurt Maya the way you hurt me, I won't give you another chance. I understand. I won't disappoint you again." As they prepared to part ways, Gloria reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought this for Maya. It's not much, but I've been carrying it around for 2 years, hoping I'd get the chance to give it to her." Sarah took the package cautiously. "What is it?" "A photo album. Pictures of you when you were Maya's age. I thought she might like to see what her mama looked like as a little girl." Maya's eyes lit up when she unwrapped the album. The first page showed Sarah at 6 years old, missing her 2 front teeth and grinning at the camera. The resemblance between mother and daughter was striking. "Mama, you look just like me." "Or you look just like me," Sarah corrected, smiling, despite the emotions churning in her chest. As they said goodbye, Gloria hugged Maya gently, and Sarah saw tears in her mother's eyes again. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Gloria said to Sarah. "I know I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to do better, Mama. But this is your only chance. Don't waste it." Driving home, Sarah felt emotionally drained but also strangely hopeful. The meeting had been painful but necessary, and seeing Gloria's genuine remorse had begun to soften some of the anger Sarah had carried for 8 years. "Did you like meeting Grandmother Gloria?" Sarah asked Maya. She was sad, but nice. Why was she so sad? She was sad because she missed out on a lot of important things. She missed out on knowing you and watching you grow up and being part of our family. But she can be part of our family now, right? Maybe, baby girl. We'll see. That evening, as Sarah tucked Maya into bed, her daughter had one more question. Mama, do you think Grandmother Gloria really will do better? Sarah thought about the question seriously. I hope so, Maya. People can change if they really want to, but it takes time to rebuild trust when someone has hurt you. Like when I broke Mrs. Chen's vase and had to do extra chores to show I was sorry? Exactly like that, except grown-up mistakes sometimes take longer to fix. After Maya fell asleep, Sarah sat in her home office looking out at the city lights of Atlanta. 8 years ago, she'd walked away from her family with nothing but determination and love for her unborn child. Tonight, she was a successful businesswoman, a homeowner, a loving mother, and possibly maybe a daughter again. The scared teenager who'd made that promise on a humid August night had kept her word. She and Maya were more than fine. They were thriving. And now, from a position of strength rather than desperation, Sarah could choose whether to let forgiveness and family back into the life she'd built. The choice was hers to make, and for the first time in 8 years, that felt like power rather than burden. 3 years later, December 2027. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sarah's new office building as she reviewed the final paperwork for her latest acquisition. At 28, Sarah Williams had become one of Atlanta's most respected young real estate investors. But today's purchase held special significance that had nothing to do with profit margins or market analysis. The building she was about to buy was the same faded brick structure on Peachtree Street, where she'd grown up, where she'd been kicked out 11 years ago, and where her mother still lived in apartment 2B. Ms. Williams, her assistant Jennifer knocked softly on the office door. The closing is scheduled for 10 a.m. Your lawyer is already at the title company. Thank you, Jen. And remember, after the closing, I want you to take the rest of the day off. Spend time with your kids. Jennifer smiled gratefully. As a single mother herself, she appreciated working for someone who understood the delicate balance between career ambition and family responsibilities. Sarah had built her company culture around flexibility and support for working parents, remembering her own struggles during Maya's early years. Sarah's real estate portfolio now included 47 rental units across Atlanta, a property management company with 12 employees, and a financial consulting firm that served over 100 small businesses. She'd been featured in Atlanta Business Chronicle as one of the city's 40 under 40 and had spoken at conferences about women in real estate and entrepreneurship. But success hadn't changed the core of who she was. She still lived modestly by choice, still drove herself to work instead of hiring a driver, and still made Maya's lunch every morning before school. Maya, now 9 years old, burst into the office with the energy that characterized everything she did. School had ended early for winter break, and Mrs. Chen had dropped her off at Sarah's office as planned. Mama, Mrs. Patterson said I got the highest score on the math test again. Maya's backpack was covered with patches from various activities: soccer, chess club, coding camp, and violin lessons. At 9, she was already showing signs of the same determination that had driven Sarah's success, but with the confidence that came from never doubting her mother's love and support. That's wonderful, baby girl. Did you remember to thank Mrs. Patterson for staying after school to help you with the extra credit problems? Of course. And I brought her the cookies Mrs. Chen made. Maya settled into the chair across from Sarah's desk with the comfort of someone who'd grown up visiting her mother's various offices. Are we really going to buy your old building today? We are. How do you feel about that? Maya considered the question with characteristic seriousness. I think it's cool that you're going to fix it up and make it nice for people to live in. And I think Grandmother Gloria will be happy that you're the owner now instead of that mean man who never fixes anything. The relationship with Gloria had evolved slowly over the past 3 years. There had been setbacks, times when Gloria's old patterns of self-pity and blame resurfaced, times when Sarah had to enforce boundaries firmly. But there had also been genuine progress. Gloria had attended Maya's school concerts, had dinner with them once a month, and had even started taking care of her diabetes properly after Sarah helped her find affordable health care. Most importantly, Gloria had proven through consistent actions that she was committed to being a better mother and grandmother. She'd never again chosen a man over her family, had been reliable in her commitments to Maya, and had slowly earned back some of Sarah's trust. Speaking of grandmother Gloria, Sarah said, she's meeting us at the building after the closing. She wants to see what we're planning to do with the renovations. The drive to the title company took them through the same neighborhoods where Sarah had once struggled as a teenage mother. Some areas had gentrified beyond recognition, while others remained unchanged. Sarah pointed out landmarks to Maya. The diner where she'd worked, Mrs. Chen's old apartment building, the park where they used to play when Maya was little. It's weird to think you used to be so poor, Maya said as they passed the modest apartment complex where Sarah had lived when Maya was a baby. We weren't poor in the ways that mattered most, Sarah corrected gently. We had love, we had determination, and we had people who cared about us. Money made things easier, but it didn't make us happier. The closing went smoothly, though Sarah felt emotional signing the papers that made her the official owner of the building where her life had changed so dramatically. She was now responsible for the same apartments where families were struggling with rent, dealing with maintenance issues, and trying to build better lives for their children. When they arrived at the building after the closing, Gloria was waiting on the front steps. At 55, she looked healthier than she had 3 years ago. Regular medical care had helped manage her diabetes, and the stability of knowing she wouldn't be evicted had reduced the stress lines around her eyes. Congratulations, baby girl, Gloria said, hugging Sarah warmly. I never thought I'd see the day when you owned this place. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? They toured the building together, Sarah taking notes on needed repairs and improvements while Maya and Gloria chatted about school and friends. The building had 8 units, currently housing 12 families, including several with children, Maya's age. What are your plans for renovations? Gloria asked as they climbed to the 3rd floor. Full renovation, but I'm not displacing anyone. I'm going to work on 1 unit at a time, offer temporary relocation assistance, and make sure current tenants get first priority when units are ready. And I'm keeping rents affordable. This neighborhood needs housing that working families can afford. It was a business model that prioritized community impact over maximum profit, something that sometimes confused other investors but aligned with Sarah's values. In apartment 2B, Gloria's apartment, they sat around the same kitchen table where Sarah had told her mother about her pregnancy 11 years earlier. The apartment looked different now, cleaner, more organized, with photos of Maya displayed prominently on the refrigerator. I have something to tell you both, Gloria said, her voice nervous but determined. I've been thinking about this for months, and I've made a decision. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, hoping her mother wasn't about to announce another destructive choice. I want to move out of this apartment. What? Sarah was surprised. Mama, you don't have to move just because I'm the owner now. I'm not going to raise your rent or change our arrangement. It's not about that. It's about me finally taking responsibility for building my own life instead of just existing in the same place where I made so many mistakes. Gloria's voice grew, stronger as she continued. I found a small 1-bedroom apartment in a senior community about 10 minutes from here. It has activities, other people my age, and it's something I can afford with my social security and the part-time job at the grocery store. Maya looked concerned. But Grandmother Gloria, if you move, we won't see you as much. Oh, sweetheart, I'm not moving far. And now that your mama owns this building, I'll probably see you more often when you come to check on things. But I think it's time for me to live somewhere that's mine, not somewhere I'm staying because I'm too scared to leave. Sarah felt a surge of pride for her mother. It had taken Gloria 55 years to choose independence over security, but she was finally making the choice. When are you thinking of moving? After the holidays. I want one more Christmas in this apartment, and then I want to start fresh in the new year. That evening, the 3 generations of women sat in Sarah's townhouse, wrapping Christmas presents and planning the holiday celebration. Maya was excited about her school's winter concert, where she would be playing violin in the advanced ensemble. Gloria had knitted scarves for everyone, including Mrs. Chen, who remained an essential part of their chosen family. Mama, Maya said, as Sarah tucked her into bed, do you think your story has a happy ending now? Sarah smiled, thinking about the question. I think our story doesn't have an ending yet, baby girl. It's still being written every day. But yes, I think the chapters we're writing now are happy ones. What do you think will happen next in our story? I don't know. Maybe you'll become a famous mathematician or start your own business. Maybe we'll travel around the world together. Maybe Grandmother Gloria will learn to use that computer I bought her and start dating someone nice. Maya giggled at the thought of her grandmother dating. What about you, Mama? What do you want to happen next in your story? Sarah had been so focused on building financial security and repairing family relationships that she hadn't thought much about what came next for her personally. She was successful, fulfilled by her work, and deeply happy as Maya's mother. But there were still dreams she hadn't pursued, goals she hadn't set. I think I want to help more people build the kind of life we have. Maybe start a program to help single mothers learn about real estate investing. Maybe write a book about starting over and building something from nothing. That sounds good. And maybe you'll fall in love with someone nice who loves us both. Sarah laughed softly. Maybe, sweetheart. But remember, love isn't something you need to be complete. It's something that adds to a life that's already full. Like frosting on a cake. X.